Where I was growing up as a young boy in the late 60s, 70s in South Africa, everything was free. I'm not kidding you, I'm serious. I grew up on the mines, and if you were white, you had to be white. Everything was free. As long as you worked for the mine, everything was free. Your house was free, your car was free, your petrol was free, your gardening service was free, your electricity was free, all the sporting facilities, 5-star sporting facilities were free. The Christmas presents you'd go choose, they'd be delivered for free. On Sundays, the mine club would put up free food. Everything was free as long as you worked for the mine. And I suppose that's where my idea of living in a community where everything is free was subconsciously planted, not realizing that that was happening. And every time I'd visit friends outside of our mining town, I'd go to Johannesburg or Pretoria and see that our friends live in the city and they'd have to pay to play tennis or pay to do this or pay to go to movies or pay to do anything. They would pay rent and be paying to fill up their car with petrol. And I'd go like, why do you want to live here? Are you crazy? Come live with us. Everything is free. And it's really, that's the destination I want to get to at the end of today. Because this little utopian idea of living in a world where everything is free, where everything is available to us because we choose to live in that kind of community, is not only possible, but I've already experienced it to a certain extent. So I just wanted to start off on that point because I always forget about this, and then I mention it over a drink afterwards and people say, you should tell people about that. So I just did. So Ubuntu around the world. When I first started talking about a world without money, and the first part of this afternoon was really giving you an introduction why and when I came to think about that. This is around 2005 when I started to realize that in ancient times money did not exist and people lived without money. And I started to think, how is that possible? How would you buy stuff? And I started to figure out how a world without money would use. And what happened was that I started on this unbelievable, exciting journey of discovery for myself. And I know that each and every one of you, some of you have probably already done it, and if you haven't done it yet, some of you are going to enter that little journey of discovery, which is really, I can tell you, the most exciting journey of discovery that anyone can go through. Imagining a world without money. And as you start to peel away the layers of deception, the layers of control, the manipulation that we've been forced into this world where money rules our lives, you realize the liberation and the liberty and the freedom that comes just with the thoughts alone when you go to bed at night, imagining that it's not only possible, that we now have a way of attaining and achieving it. That is the most exciting thing that I would like everyone here to leave with today. I didn't imagine for 1 second at any stage that this idea would turn into a movement. And here we are, 11 years later, and the Ubuntu movement is alive in virtually every country of the world. We have supporters and people that share and resonate the idea. I think the only country that I can't recall having any members in or followers is North Korea. Otherwise, I can think of pretty much every other country. And this just shows you, it's an idea whose time has come. It's not my idea. I somehow just stumbled upon this channel of information. I tapped into it and I'm here sharing it with you. It could have been any one of you doing this, but somehow it landed on my shoulders and I'm doing it and I'm not going to stop because once you open that door, there's no turning back. And you know this, that's why you're here. And you're not here by any stroke by accident. You're here by design. There are no accidents, and you should know that by now. Most of this philosophy I wrote down 2 years ago and put into a book called Ubuntu Contributionism. And it is just the philosophy and the idea and the history about the money to allow us to understand why we live in this crazy and insane world. And that cover took a long time to design. Okay? It is not a pyramid in there. It's an equilateral triangle inside a circle that represents perfect harmony and resonance. So if anybody tells you, oh, Michael Tellinger is into those, like, no. That's a very specifically created cover. that Willem de Swart and I spent several weeks designing to encode it with all the right energies and frequencies to send those that have been using this kind of technology, because this is a technology, against us, to tell them, we know what you're up to, stop it. We know the same stuff you know, and then you balance and balance the playing field. Because once they know that we know, there's not much they can do, and we've equalized the energy. So, the point is that we live on a deeply divided planet, and it's this division that's being used against us in every possible way. I mean, just look at what's going on. We're divided on every possible level we can imagine, and that division is the never-ending tool of separation and conflict, and it just gets worse and worse. Every time you read the papers or turn the TV on, it just deepens the division. I also believe, as many of you do, that we do live in the age of prophecy, and that we are the ones we've been waiting for. This is why you are here. And if we are the ones we're waiting for, then we must be the ones that do something about it. And since you're here, then obviously it's this group here that's going to do something about it. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. So you've taken on a serious responsibility by walking through those doors today. Because, you know, if you don't start doing something about it, it's going to play on your mind. It's going to bug you at the back of your mind. And you don't have to do much, really. You don't have to do a lot. You don't have to change your life or give up your job or do anything. All you have to do, the most important thing that each of us have to do, is just talk to other people. Just share your knowledge and share your information. Because the word and personal contact and the sharing of this information still remains the most powerful way of spreading an idea. And never ever underestimate the effect of a small number of people on the large majority. And it starts with little groups like this, and the meetings I've had in Switzerland, in Austria, in Germany, in Italy, in the Czech Republic, and in Spain, and in Ireland 2 days ago. Even if the groups are small, it's what the people walk away with and the intention with which they leave and start spreading the philosophy, because it's encoded in your heart, not because you've tried to memorize some weird philosophy, because it becomes part of your life and it resonates every cell in your body. That's why this is so powerful, and that's why I keep doing this. And that's why my presentations have moved from talking about ancient civilizations to purely Ubuntu and contributionism and a way forward. Wow. That was a mouthful. How many of you are happy with the way the world is going today? Please put your hand up. There's always one joker. Same thing. I've been doing this for 11 years around the world. Not once does anyone ever put up their hand. People, it doesn't matter what country you go to, it doesn't matter what town or city or village you go to, everyone is equally unhappy. And this is our power to unite us. The fact that we all know something is wrong. And we are now discovering very rapidly what is wrong. And this presentation here today, this interaction, sharing of energy and information, because I'm picking up stuff from you whether I like it or not, just like you're picking up stuff from me. This sharing of energy and information is so critical for us to be able to take this forward in a united front of conscious individuals that know what they're doing, know what they believe in, because it is that consciousness that drives us forward. We live on a planet of abundance. We do not live on a planet of scarcity. We should live in paradise. We should have so much of everything we can imagine that it'll boggle those that can't imagine it. But we find that our system is broken. It cannot be fixed. The reason that I wrote that Ubuntu book is because I realized that we need to give the people around the world some sort of a document or anything to imagine what a world without money would be like. What would we do if money just suddenly disappeared? How would we survive? So that if and when something like that could or would happen, there are already enough or a critical mass of people that have imagined a world without money, and that we don't start running around and start shooting and killing each other for little bits of food that remain. Because that's really what happens when you see situations of disaster, when the shops are raided of food and so forth. What happens when all the shops have been raided of food? You know, so this is really a philosophy of not going down that kind of thought process, but actually imagining the opposite. where we start working together. And in essence, you realize also, in moments of disaster, how people start working together, how people start pulling together and helping each other, until what happens? Until the government steps in. And then everything gets broken down and separated, compartmentalized, the military starts to do this, and then suddenly all the people working together get separated again. Even on that level, we have to find a new system. And our friend Albert made it very clear to us that we can't solve the problems with the same kind of thinking we used that created the problems. So we really need to step completely and right outside of that box and think very, very differently about what we're going to do about our future. And that's what this Ubuntu movement is all about. Complete change and turnabout about what we've been thinking. So what is this Ubuntu thing? It's an African philosophy. It is not an exclusively African philosophy. Every ancient culture, all the ancient people of the world have had the same philosophy by different names and different expressions, but ultimately in Africa we call it Ubuntu. And this resonates in all of our hearts. We cannot get rid of it. And this is when you start seeing this written down, or you see images of it, it starts to reactivate your genetic memory and starts to shake you at the core of your humanness, because that's what the word actually means. It's all about the essence of being human. It's not some strategy for a world without money and a plan of action and spreadsheets and no. It's exactly the antithesis of that. It is the interaction between living, breathing human beings, realizing that together we can create infinite abundance. And we don't need the technology that has been dividing us. We don't need computers and spreadsheets and projections. We can do all of this without that technology. We can choose, however, what technology we use to help us to achieve that abundance. So it's about the people and never about the technology or the tools we use. People first, everything comes second. And that's what I believe makes the Ubuntu movement different from most other movements, or many other movements that often put technology or money or etc. ahead. So the Ubuntu movement is all about the people, and everything comes next. The other critical thing is the meaning of the word is often being used as I am who I am because who we all are. I've translated that in some of the presentations of unity in community, creating abundance through unity. And then around 2006, I came up with a word called Contributionism, in which I tried to define a modern society expression of an ancient philosophy, where we all contribute our natural talents or acquired skills for the greater benefit of everyone in our community. And it became Contributionism. And it is not just another ism. Like some people say, oh, it's just another ism. No, it's not. It is like no other ism has ever been, because it works without money. It removes money from society. And I must also tell you that when we talk about a world without money, it is not about me saying, I'm going to take your money away. Some people go, oh, what do you mean? I'm going to take my... No. Because when you tell people, oh, we're going to move towards a world without money, people go into fear. They go, what, you're going to take my money away? How am I going to survive? No, that's not what it's about. It is a world where we no longer need money to survive. And there's a difference. So people go into fear because they think a world without money, they associate that with a lack of money, where you can't afford things and you can't get that because you got no money. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a whole new paradigm where you no longer need money to get anything you've ever imagined. So over the years, this 5-point mantra has somehow stuck. And every time we try and add another thing to it, we realize it's not necessary. So this 5-point mantra is still around. No money, no barter, no trade, no value attached to anything greater than anything else, and a community where everyone contributes their natural talents or acquired skills for the greatest benefit of everyone in the community. I must make it very clear that this philosophy does not involve any bartering or trade. Many people jump to the conclusion, as we often do, we must get rid of money and must go back to barter and trade. No, that's not what we're doing. Bartering and trading is just another form of exchange. As long as you get any form of exchange or any tokens or tools or mechanisms of exchange, somebody will be in a position to be able to abuse that. and they'll find a way to abuse it. So we've got to move way beyond that, and you realize how simple it is once we take the blinkers off and stop throwing obstacles in our way. And what I've found, no matter where I go, as we go through this process and these workshops and discussions and presentations, what I find, how people keep throwing obstacles and hurdles in our way, in their own way. And what if this, and what if these guys come and do this? What if? What if what? Let's carry on. We know where we're going, and let's keep going in the direction that we've chosen to go. We deal with problems as and when they arise. So every day on this path that is filled with obstacles at this stage that we're dealing with in any case, you hear, the obstacles weren't that bad. We face millions of problems. And we're told by our governments and our authorities that it's not easy, it's complicated. And that our governments are doing the best they can. We keep hearing all the excuses in the world. We all know that these are all lies, because you know in your hearts and in your minds that the solutions are very simple. And we know that the children know that the solutions are simple. Go into any primary school and ask a bunch of grade 1 children, and they'll tell you exactly what the solutions are. But that's not going to happen, is it? We know that the solutions are simple. Our farmers, our scientists, our engineers, our mothers and our children have the answers. But seemingly, our governments and our so-called elected leaders that are supposed to serve us, by the way, supposed to be our servants, cannot find the solutions for our problems. And we realize that the moment we start working towards a world without money, and you embrace this philosophy of Ubuntu or contributionism, you realize that the solutions are so simple that we simply cannot screw it up. It's not possible to screw it up because we're removing the main obstacle of progress, money. And you'll see how this unfolds. We cannot screw it up because suddenly we're following the laws of nature. And it's the sacred geometry that surrounds us, that makes up everything in our reality, that we're starting to emulate. And therefore, I call it a self-correcting system. No matter what problem you inject into this philosophy, no matter what problems you throw at it, it always corrects itself for the best outcome of the entire community. That's why I call it a self-correcting system. And what I can tell you is after 11 years and hundreds of thousands of problems and questions that have been thrown at me in live situations, on email, and etc., in various other ways, hundreds of thousands of problems and questions, the philosophy is stronger today than it's ever been before. Because from every problem or every question or every hurdle we face, we solve it and it gets stronger. So the philosophy gets stronger and more stable with every passing minute and every passing day. That's the most amazing thing. In Cape Town, Dr. Masera Emoto visited the Ubuntu Wellness Center, and my friend Ray, who helped to organize this here, Ray and I were there in 2012, I think, and we met the owners of the Wellness Center, and they showed us what Masera Emoto did with water and saying the word Ubuntu to it. And then they froze it in his famous work and famous breakthrough scientific research. They captured the word Ubuntu in water, and that's what it turned out to be. And this is what he described. This is what he said about it. He said, a beautiful circle appeared inside the crystal. I believe that the circle, one of you is in trouble. I believe that the circle is Ubuntu itself. It signifies that everything is in perfect harmony. Only when everything is in harmony and accord, all the beings will attain true happiness. And that's exactly what this word and this philosophy does. It brings us to our true happiness and resonating with the core values of being human. But we just want to remind you that we live in this invisible matrix, and sometimes movies that come from Hollywood, and in some of my presentations I go into a lot more detail about how Hollywood plays a very important role in actually waking us up, contrary to our popular belief. And sometimes the movies are just so obvious that it truly boggles the mind. Most of us saw The Matrix. We really didn't understand it at the time. It was way ahead of its time. And this is how Morpheus describes the slave system. Remember in the previous part here when he holds up the battery and he says, we're the energy, and more encoded information in that movie. But this is how he describes the slave system. A matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. Don't really like that, but let's carry on. You may have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. And that's pretty much the majority of the human population today. Unawake, unaware of what's going on, fighting to protect the slave system in which they're the slaves. So that's what we're breaking. We're breaking that chain. The Truman Show calls it so beautifully when the producer, who happens to sit in the moon, remember, controlling the reality that takes place on Earth from the moon. He said, we accept, and when he was asked, why does Truman just accept the reality around him? And he says, because we accept the reality of the world with which we are presented. And that's what many people just do over and over again, bowing to authority, following rules and laws that have been created for us that we've got nothing to do with creating. We're not born free. We've done this already. We cannot move around freely. We cannot live where we choose to. We need passports and work permits. How many of you have tried to move to another country and realize how difficult that is? Exactly. You can't just pack up and move to another country. Forget it. But take your company and try and open it in another country. They welcome you with open arms. Yeah, bring your corporation. Absolutely. We need to enslave more of our people. Bring more money. We want more of your money and more slaves, because that's what it is. So it just shows you that corporations have infinitely more freedom than people have. And we have to follow rules and laws that we did not agree to. You know, we are born, we come out of the womb completely free, sovereign human beings. And suddenly, all these laws and things get slapped on us. We have nothing to do with the laws and the acts and the bills and the legislations that suddenly we have to abide by. Wow, that's insane. And then at one stage we realize as children that we have to go and get a job, that we have to work, or we have to do something to earn money. Otherwise you're going to pretty much starve. And even if you grow your food, the authorities come after you and charge you taxes on the food you grow, or say that you can't grow it here and you can't grow it there and you can't use these seeds or you can't do that. It's like, oh, you can't get water from there and you can't use wind for energy. It's like all these, really? It's like, what the hell's going on? And we just put up with it over and over and over again. It's just like, reminds me of Spartacus, the movie, you know. One of the slaves has to rise up and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. We have to pay taxes to escape jail time. This is not freedom. This is slavery, and we are completely and utterly enslaved by money. Now, until you come to terms with the fact that money is the primary tool of enslavement, you'll forever be lost and confused about how the slavery system works. Do not for 1 second try and find any excuse for money. It does not belong in our society. It is completely and utterly a manifested or manipulated tool of control that was injected into our society at a very specific point in time. It has become the holy cow. You can talk badly about the Jews or the Muslims or the Christians or the Hindus or the Buddhists or whoever you choose to talk badly about, and you'll probably have some friends that will come along with you. But the moment you start talking about money, people freak out. Well, hold on, buddy, you're going a bit too far, you know? What do you say? You want to get rid of money? Oh, no. We need money, man. How are we going to buy stuff? It's amazing. People just go into this immediate denial and defending the system and the number one tool of slavery that enslaves us. They defend the tools that enslave us because they don't know enough. They don't have enough information. And this is what this presentation and this meeting today is going to dispel and break down and dissolve Wolfgang Goethe made one of the most epic statements for our current time when he said, "None are more enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." The emphasis here on falsely. And this is the falseliness in our belief that keeps us enslaved. Because people say, "Oh, what do you mean I'm a slave? I'm free. I can get in my car and drive to Liverpool anytime I choose to. I can go visit my friends in America. I can do what I want." Really? Let me take your money away. Let me take the petrol away. And let me take your passport away. See how far you get. So everything is about brands, corporations, and careers. And all the politicians keep talking about jobs. We're going to create 1 million more jobs. Every time you hear a politician say that, you must realize that they're just promoting the slave system. And they're told exactly what to do, because this is how conniving these individuals are. Job equals slave. When your company no longer needs you, they kick you out on the street. And you're back homeless or without food, begging, doing whatever it takes to survive. Jobs are not a solution. We have much better solutions. When you realize that the bankers actually own the world through the corporations, the plot starts to thicken. If you think you own your home, or you really own anything, you're still deluded. We own very little. And the bankers, because they supply the money for the corporations, end up owning the corporations, because if the corporations goes bankrupt, they can bail the corporation out, or buy them, or take them. And the same goes for our countries. Banks bail out countries. We're coming back to that. The historic resistance to money is quite spectacular, because we don't realize this. We don't realize how long people have been resisting the money, the bankers and the money makers. It goes back thousands and thousands of years. We're not by far the first ones. We're just a perpetuation of that same resistance. Not a nice word, but let's use that. The opposition to money throughout human history. In just some great examples that you will all be familiar with. 48 BC, Julius Caesar took back from the money changers the power to coin money and minted his own money for Rome. And suddenly Rome became so powerful and they could do everything and anything. And you know what happened to Julius Caesar, right? The bankers didn't like that. They lost control. In 1225, this is a fascinating little passage in the history of the church, when we realize that even the church realized that the bankers were playing a dangerous game when they made a law that forbade the charging of interest on loans, and they made it a crime called usury. Well, that law no longer applies because the bankers won that war. And then this very popular chap called Jesus or Jeshua or Issa, this individual in history that carries so much energy and so much emotions with him. The only apparent time where he displayed violence was against who and where? The bankers in the temple. Keep those words in mind, banking and temples, because this becomes very, very important. Thomas Jefferson gave us a cutting statement when he said, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless." And that's exactly what's happened. I forget what year it was, but 1860 around there, when Lincoln's greenback, when was Lincoln around? Doesn't matter. When his greenbacks basically got rid of all the debt in the United States, and America was free of debt, and the Americans had a prosperous future for themselves. You know what happened to Lincoln? He got a bullet in the head. And exactly 100 years later, JFK did the same thing when he issued the United States notes. When he got the Treasury to issue a new public currency, and he stopped the Fed from printing the United States dollars. 6 months later, he got a bullet in the head. Within 2 weeks, the Fed started printing the money again. And you start seeing the same pattern over and over again. About $4 billion of the United States notes went into circulation. The way you distinguish the United States note from the current dollar bill is look just above the picture. It says United States note, the first thing written there, United States note. Today, dollars say Federal Reserve note, not United States note. Big difference. In essence, it was a people's bank that was printing that money. And if a people's bank prints money, it's tax-free, interest-free, free of any levies, fees, anything. There's no need for us to ever pay tax. That's part of the con. Nothing should ever be taxed because it's supposed to be our money, the bank of the people. If we issue the money ourselves, why would we charge ourselves any tax or any fees or levies or interest rate? It's an insanity. It's our money. The only reason that happens is because the banking industry is a private corporation. And this is why it happens. But you know this by now. This is 7 days before JFK died. He made this statement. There's a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman, and child. Before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot. Well, he didn't get that far. The problem with these guys was that they never made it public. They didn't tell the people what they were doing. They kept it almost like a secret. That's not how you win this game. So this is why with the Ubuntu movement, I go around the world and I tell people everything and anything that we do, what we plan to do, how we're going to do it, because that's how you keep everything open. And you share with the people what your plan of action is. So if something happens to me, it doesn't matter. There's a million people out there that already know the plan and know what we should be doing. And that's how you spread this philosophy that grows like an unstoppable seed or mycelium. 3 years later, after JFK was assassinated, the South African Prime Minister, Hendrik Verwoerd, was stabbed in the heart. They left the blood on the carpet in the presidential office for 30 years as a warning to anyone that followed him. It was made to look like an apartheid crime because of apartheid. It had nothing to do with apartheid. But this is how they always twist the situation. Hendrik Verwoerd at that stage was investigating very heavily the global banking industry, the banking families and the central banks, and he was about to shut the South African Reserve Bank. In 1966, South Africa was the most prosperous country in the world. That would have been devastating for the Rothschilds. That would have shut their access to the golden goose that kept laying the golden eggs of the platinum, the gold, the diamonds, the chrome, and they were not going to let that happen. You got to be kidding. So you see how this just perpetuates over and over and over again. Now, to understand how this control can be so severe, so strong, you need to go to the root of the problem and the origins of this thing called money. Very few people actually know where money comes from, what it is, how it works, who creates it, who's in charge and control of creating it, why is it distributed in certain ways. So I'm going to dispel anything you may have learned or been told in the past. Most of us are sitting with the wrong information about money, what it is and where it comes from. So from now on, if anybody starts telling you about money coming along for thousands of years of barter and trade, just tell them to stop. Tell them to go home, go away and do some more research, because they're spewing forth the disinformation that most of us have sucked up and believed. When did it get so bad? We have to go back to that Sumerian civilization and the Sumerian texts. When we read in the Sumerian kings lists, and there's two of them here that carry the same information found at different times from different places, which is really interesting to find that kind of information. And they talk about a time in human history when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven. It means this is a time when we suddenly find the appearance of the first royal bloodlines, the emergence of royalty on earth. This is where our current royal bloodlines on earth come from this moment in history, when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven and the first priest kings were appointed by the gods. First priest kings suddenly appear. They have knowledge of sorcery, alchemy, wizardry. They have weapons of mass destruction with which they can smite people and control thousands of people, and this is how they controlled the people, because they were made king by some high authority. Otherwise, why would anybody want to listen to some guy that says, I'm going to be your king? I mean, it's insane, right? Imagine this is our community of 200 people, whatever it is. And tomorrow morning I wake up and I call a meeting. I say, listen, I've got a great idea, guys. I think you're going to love this. As of today, all this land now going to belong to me. Right? And I'm going to be this guy called king. And nothing's going to change. We're still going to be here working together, but everything's going to belong to me. You're going to work for me, and then I'll protect you. It's a great idea, eh? No. Why would you suck that up? And yet this is exactly what happened. Suddenly these kings appeared and they owned all the land. And this is what happened. Small group of royal political elite bloodlines took control of the world. They suddenly owned all the land, and they controlled the land with some sort of fierce weapons that they got from who knows where. I suspect you may know where they got it from. I suspect you may know what some of those weapons were now. And they controlled everything with money and real estate. It's actually royal estate, right? Royal estate. So this is an example of the oldest printed form of money we get, because this is what these first priest kings did. One of the first things they did is they started to print money into clay tablets. Remember that the banks don't work with money. Banks work with promissory notes, bills of exchange, and negotiable instruments printed on paper. What's fascinating about this is that we're looking at an ancient negotiable instrument that's 4,000 years old. What's even more bizarre about that the modern banking industry works in exactly the same way as the priests worked in their temples 4,000 years ago, printing the same kind of nonsense on pieces of clay. At least that clay lasted. Even if it got into a fire, it lasted. Today, the pieces of paper that our banks print the money on burn up in a fire. It actually shows you that it's completely meaningless and it has no value whatsoever. So the first kings owned the land. They were the first bankers, and the temples were their first banks. That's where the first money comes from, people, not from thousands of years of barter and trade. It comes from a very specific moment in history when money was maliciously introduced as a tool of enslavement, because they realized they can't enslave the people. There were just not enough kings and too many people, and money became the tool of enslavement and control. In fact, the most recent archaeological discoveries tell us, and this is where archaeology very unexpectedly suddenly contradicts what's going on with history and what the other side of history tells us, and what the bankers are trying to tell us. The most recent archaeological discovery tells us that ancient civilizations did not have barter and trade. They did not practice bartering and trading, that they lived in these communities and they had everything that they did for themselves. And it seems that barter and trade evolved at a later stage when money first came into existence, much later. You all know that the central banks have absolute control. I'm going to spend much time on it. But I do this because there are still people that are new to this. So if you know this, see this as revision. For those that are new to it, welcome to the club. The banking families of the world are the largest organized crime syndicate in the world. That's all they are. They've managed to hijack the entire planet and turn each and every one of us into their slaves. You know who these banking families are. The one that we specifically need to pay attention to is the one that often escapes our attention, and those are the Carnegies, because they're largely responsible for the current education system that is part of the slavery and the brainwashing of our children that then grow up into being us, wondering what the hell happened. So all these banking families, remember, they own all the central banks, they control all the supply of money in the world, and they control the governments. It is astonishing how many people still do not get that. How many people still believe that the government controls the banks? Stop that immediately and wake up. If banks bail out countries, who's the highest authority? Right? Do I need to drum that into your heads? No. The banks are the highest authority and always will be. As long as there's a central bank that's privately controlled, it remains the highest authority because it issues the money for the country. So the banks control our governments. They tell our governments what to do. So it doesn't matter who the prime minister or the president is. It's just a puppet that is spewing forth the disinformation of the bankers. And now we know where to change things. Just in case you forgot what they own, is the World Bank, the European Central Bank, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, the Federal Reserve Bank. These are the guys that started the Fed in 1913. And incidentally, if you're not aware of it, the way that they got rid of all the opposition from Europe in New York is they did the following. And this is how cunning they are, right? So they said, to the Europeans, you don't like what we're doing. So excellent. So why don't you come over here? We'll have a big meeting in New York and we'll decide what to do about the establishment of the Fed. And they took all the people that were opposing them from Europe, and they put them onto one big boat called the Titanic. Yes, this is the truth. And they pushed the Titanic into the ocean and took all the opposition to the bottom of the ocean. That's how they get rid of opposition. The Bank of England is the mother of them all, right here, under our feet. The South African Reserve Bank that mysteriously looks on that picture like a giant eagle sitting perched with its wings spread out. I just love that picture when I saw that. Sent shivers up my spine. And if you don't know, I petitioned the South African Reserve Bank. In fact, I took them to court in 2 years. Geez, I forget how long it was now. Where I issued them with a 1,000-page document, arguments against crimes against humanity, against all the banks in South Africa, including the Reserve Bank. And when I went into that dark building, from the back into the bowels of the building to deliver the papers to them, they were so confused because they were never served with a summons. Because they're the ones that always serve the summons on everyone else. So it took about an hour for them to figure out that I'm actually serving legal papers on them. And it's not the sheriff of the court because I'm the guy and I was representing myself. So this was even more confusing for them. And anyway, it's like the outcome of that was... So those of you that don't know, so I really walked that path for 4 years in the courts, the Supreme Court and then the Constitutional Court of South Africa, when I realized how completely crooked the entire legal system is. So I had to do that so that I can speak here with complete experience and that knowledge because I've walked that path. The interesting thing is, and I'm probably going to come back to this, the response from the South African Constitutional Court, the highest court of the law of the people, the Constitutional Court came back to me and said, we won't accept your case because you have no prospect of success. The paper is on my website, on the Ubuntu Party website. You can go find it. So I'm going to come back to that. When you read that, you realize who runs the country, right? You can't sue the bank. The highest court in the land won't even allow me to sue them. So this is why we find a new alternative. We don't fight them anymore. We don't oppose them. We don't resist them. We find a completely different way to change our future by taking all that dark and negative energy that they keep pouring at us, that they spend billions and trillions of dollars every month to keep us under control. We take all that energy and we just convert it into energy that serves us. Just turn it around and turn it into something that actually creates abundance for us. So much so that very, very, very soon in the future, those that believe they control us have no one to control because we've created a whole new reality. And if you think it's not possible, by the time you leave here, you'll not only realize it's possible, but you realize that we're already on our way doing it. We're busy doing it already. The Reserve Bank of Australia, the Reserve Bank of India, all of these banks, all the central banks, and this is the place that they're controlled from, Basel, Switzerland, Bank for International Settlements. This is where they send instructions to all the private central banks to tell them what to do. And then the central bank calls in the Minister of Finance or the President or the Prime Minister and tells them, sit down, buddy, this is what you're going to do. Remember what I said already? Banks bail out countries, and this gives us a very clear indication of who is the highest control body in the country. And this is why they can do it, because they make money out of thin air. Some people still don't understand it. Banks have no money. They have the right, the exclusive right to create money out of thin air. If anybody else tries to do that, they go to jail for a long, long, long time. And this is why it's a crime against humanity. Everything the banks do puts blood on their hands. You can just think about how long they've controlled this planet and how long they've controlled people, their countries, how many wars they've waged. So when I say the banks have blood on their hands, literally blood every day of killing, being responsible for the death and the murder and the killing of millions of people every day. Banks have blood on their hands. You cannot explain it any other way. And it's at this point that we also need to realize that all money is blood money. There is no clean money. So if there's some people that say, well, we need to use money from a good source, yes, it may make you feel better. But I've just had an issue in the United States where I had to deal with the USA Ubuntu movement, where I had to explain to them, guys, all money is blood money. Doesn't matter who gives it to us. What matters is what we do with that money. If you think that the money in your wallet is clean, or when you go to the ATM and you draw some money from the ATM, oh, you can have clear conscience, your money is clean. Forget about it, you just deluded. So, on this path, to free ourselves from this, we're going to need a lot of money, and we constantly need funding. Constantly, because we cannot free ourselves from the money system without money, because that's how it's been structured. This is why all attempts in the past have failed, because all these bleeding heart leftists and bunny huggers and tree huggers, beautiful people that do not understand violence and conflict, they just want to live in love. They don't understand that you need money to break the system down. So where you'll see as we go through this, it is all about the money. And in the beginning stages, we're going to have to get as much money as we can to free ourselves from the money. It's not the only solution, but it's certainly a method to fast track us to the solution. So the other important thing I mentioned already, is central banks operate outside the control of the legal system. They are above the legal system. You cannot sue the central bank. Okay? And I've just given you the example. You have no prospect of success. All wars are bankers' wars. Throughout all of human history, it's always the bankers that start the wars. And you can read more about that in John Perkins' amazing book about how governments are overthrown by the moneymakers, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Until the year 2000, the following countries had their own people's banks or state banks. And you can start seeing the agenda. It's just spectacular. Just when you start putting these facts down on paper, you realize what's going on.
That's actually the first thing they did in Iraq when they overthrew Saddam Hussein.
Yes.
Before doing anything else, they instituted the central bank.
Yes, that was about Iraq. First thing they did when they overthrew Saddam Hussein is institute a central bank. They do that in Libya and all the other countries. The other important thing to realize that our countries are corporations. Most of you will know this. To some this will be new. Just to show you the actual physical evidence of this. So I use South Africa as an example. Top one there, you can see Anglo-American. Underneath it, Government of the Republic of South Africa. These are companies, as you can look, they're companies with the names matching South Africa. This is from the US Securities and Exchange, where registered companies and listed companies are listed. You can go and do your own research. And then below here, it goes down Old Mutual, Lehman Brothers, Old Mutual, and then Republic of South Africa. And then down here, Standard Bank of South Africa. That's the first bank that I went up against in the Supreme Court of Johannesburg. And this is just a list of more countries, just to show you that it's right across the world. Every country, every province, every state, every county, every city is registered as a corporation. It is a never-ending web of deception. All corporatization, and this is why the laws of the land and the laws of the country are not laws to protect the people. They are laws to protect the rights of corporations, because everything is incorporated. And that's why corporations are constantly upheld. I just listened to the Prime Minister of Canada the other day on news while I was traveling. I think I was Italy or wherever. And here's this guy. It's like a machine talking about, we've got to bring more rights for our corporations. We can make sure that our companies are strong so they can create more jobs for our people. It's like they program these guys when they put them into power. And at the heart of all this brainwashing is our education system. We're all products of our education system. And that's where the manipulation begins. It is quite spectacular how brilliant it is. And remember that money controls the education system. Everything in there is controlled by money. Our children are brainwashed. They're brutally manipulated for 12 years of our lives. Do those schools look like places of learning and education? They look like prisons. It's exactly what they are, prisons for our minds. Education institutions are perfect tools of manipulation, destroy our ability to think for ourselves. And this is the very important thing to remember, maybe news to some of you, but they're great places to hide information. Every time a major new bit of research or invention comes out of university, it belongs to that university and it never leaves. Like that professor from Skidmore College that showed us how to cure cancer with sound frequencies, hidden. It belongs to the university. He will never ever be able to release it. And that's how it works. And remember, who funds the research laboratories? The bankers fund the research laboratories because they got the money. And this is how they control what goes into the textbooks, and the rest is history. This is why we're here, wondering what the hell happened. And we need to stop this. So I keep telling everyone wherever I go, take your children out of school today. Not tomorrow, not next week, next year. Take your children out of school today. If you live in a country that you can homeschool your children, do it now. Stop torturing your children for another day. And you'll realize I know that there are lots of parents say, yeah, but my school is great. My school, they do this and that. And yes, they do amazing things, but you still end up a product of the same brainwashing process. It just makes you feel a little bit better about it. And you played a little bit more cricket or a little bit more rugby or a little bit more that because you've got the best facilities, but at the end you come out the same, sausage as the rest of the sausage machine creates. So the main objective of our education system is to create a future obedient labor force. Because how many of you can bake bread? Put your hand up. How many of you can bake bread? Wow! That's a surprising amount. That's at least, 15% of the people. How many of you can build a bridge? How many of you can build a free energy device? Yeah. Oh, you just gave yourself away. Yeah. How many of you can weave material? Wow, this is an educated crowd. You need to start your own schools. I'm not kidding. I'm serious, because what you know is very rapidly becoming an extinct trade. People's knowledge, people's skills are being very rapidly removed from our education system. Most of us come out of school, we know nothing. We can't do any of these things. Can't bake bread, can't do anything. Can't even plant seeds, can't grow food. And yet, we come out with this thing called a certificate. And with the certificate, we go around looking for a job. Now, if that's not obvious what's going on here, so that's what we got to stop. And we realize that we don't need your education. Thank you, Pink Floyd. We don't need your mind control. Teacher, leave my kids alone. We can teach our children ourselves in communities that we put together by choice, that serve everyone in our community and do not serve the governments, the oppressors and the bankers to create a future labor force. The needs of people are very simple. What do we need? Water, food, love, friendship, venues, projectors, computers, microphones, tables, chairs, clothes, anything we can imagine that we need that will improve our lives. What is not on that list is money. Because money does not make the world go around as we've been told all our lives. The world goes around all perfectly by itself. I've never seen money attached to it anyway. This picture does, yeah. So remember that money does nothing. People do everything. We grow the food. We plant the seeds. We develop the technology. We solve the mathematical equations. We're capable of infinite love and creating the most beautiful works of art. Money can never ever do that. What money does is constantly get in the way of us trying to achieve that. We spend all of our lives trying to do things, and most of us cannot do what we really want to do because we never have enough money. So what that does, you can see very clearly how money is the tool that not only divides and separates us and enslaves us, but it constantly is a tool that prevents us from reaching in and using our God-given talents and our natural skills to express our creative abilities. And you'll see how we're going to change that. By the time we leave here, you'll know exactly how to change it and the steps we're going to take. Every day, this is the most incredible thing when you start putting us together. Every day, 7.5 billion people wake up and we do the most amazing things. We create so much, it boggles the mind. We cannot imagine in this moment right now how much stuff and food and technology and how much we create. And yet, most of us do not have access to what it is we've just done. Most people don't have access to food. Many people don't have access to clean water and clothes and heat and shelter. Many of us don't have access to what we've done. And this is the crime against humanity, because we're not doing it for ourselves. We're constantly doing all this as slaves for some corporation, or for some municipality, or for some government, or for some other organization. We no longer do these things for ourselves and for our communities. This is what we're going to change very, very quickly. Some people say, oh, money is not, there's no problem with money, it's just an energy exchange, just a form of energy, and it allows us to exchange stuff, and you just dilute it. Money is not a problem. It's not money, it's the love of money, it's a problem. Really? No. It's nothing to do with the love of money. And by now you should know that it's the pure presence of money that creates all these problems. And we're going to get rid of that money and get rid of the problems. Because we cannot solve the problems we've created with the same kind of thinking that we used when we created the problems. So we cannot solve our problems with money. Since that is the fundamental tool of creating all the problems, that's the fundamental thing we need to get rid of. And that's what we're going to do. Remove the money. And that's when many people start to shake, shiver, and freak out. Because they think of it as a lack of money, right? Oh, my God, I'm not going to have any money to buy food or pay for electricity or whatever. No, we're going to get rid of it and create a society where we no longer need money. And that's when the 13 frequently asked questions pop up. I'd just like you to read them and tell me how many of those have already popped through your mind. It's like clockwork, I tell you. It's the same stuff over and over again. So what I found in 11 years and hundreds of thousands of questions and people that I've spoken to, all our insecurities, all our fears, all our reservations, I've been able to compress into 13 most frequently asked questions, because many of them are just repetitions and different varieties of the same question. What I'm telling you here is the best news you could ever possibly hear. Because in a world with money, as we sit here today and you walk out of those doors, we face millions of problems every day that we cannot solve. With all the money in the world and the best economists that come on our TV day in, day out, telling us how they're going to solve our problems, how we're going to borrow there and beg from here and change the money there, and they have all the plans, and each one of those plans means we're going to get more enslaved and we're going to have to work harder and get an extra job, right? Just to pay back all these plans that they're making on our behalf on TV. All the money in the world, millions of problems, we can't solve them. When you suggest a world without money, 11 years, hundreds of thousands of questions, people keep coming up with 13 problems only that we have to solve in a world where we don't have money. And already it's showing us that it's an infinitely more eloquent solution to get rid of the money. And we already know how to solve these 13 problems. And by the time we finished here, I'm not going to have to tell you anything about these. You'll be able to answer each one and every one of these, because I don't want to be the one to answer them for you. You need to answer it yourself. You need to look into your heart and you need to find those answers to these questions. And I know that you already have answers to most of them. Maybe you're just too afraid sometimes to voice them. Just some more of these questions. I just thought I'd let you read it because they really are funny. And when we leave here, you're going to laugh at them. I know, it happens every single time. Can you guys at the back read it? It's like here, for example, what about progress and advancement and technology? Does this mean we're going to regress and go backwards? Really? Is that what you think? We're going to set our scientists free to invent and create without restriction, and you think we're going to go backwards? No, you're missing the point here, buddy. That first one is just, it's just the same thing. Who's going to provide the food? Well, really? taking from the rich and giving to the poor. Can you see, this is just the repetition, it's just the psyche of humanity. What I found by just opening this up is that we're all equally wired. Our minds are all equally poisoned, no matter what country you live in. And the system has just distorted our perception of reality and our ability to create infinite abundance. So the first thing we need to change is this. All our lives, we've been told that competition is what keeps the world going. Competition is what drives progress. Competition, the people create inventions, and competition is what drives industry. No, that's the biggest lie. In fact, that could possibly quite well be the most evil lie and distortion that we've been told, or the most manipulative tool of our distortion. Competition. Competition destroys lives, families, countries. It has got blood all over it. Competition prevents inventions from being released. Competition has caused people to die of horrible diseases because of the drug companies withholding the cures for disease. All we got to do is turn that one horrible philosophy of competition 180 degrees and turn it into cooperation and collaboration and see how quickly everything changes. It is such a simple philosophy that most people just can't even imagine that it can be that simple. And yet, it is this thing of collaboration and cooperation that remains the most difficult thing for us to do as human beings today. Because we have been so badly destroyed and so damaged in our thinking, in our psyche, our physically, emotionally, spiritually. We've been so damaged and so separated that to get people to work together and cooperate remains one of the most difficult things for us to do. And you will see that the plan of action we take with the Ubuntu movement, and specifically the Ubuntu party, as an integral part of the Ubuntu movement, not a separate part. With the Ubuntu party, we have a plan of action that provides a platform for the people to give them the comfort to be able to cooperate and collaborate and not fear each other. And that is why this plan of action is so simple and is being embraced by so many people as I travel around the world. It also reminds us that only out of unity can you achieve or attain infinite diversity. There is no other way. You cannot have infinite diversity from an area of chaos. Out of unity, we have to decide together that we're going to create abundance, and then it'll come. One of the best and simplest examples for this infinite abundance out of unity is our body. Our bodies. There are trillions of cells in our bodies that all work together for the benefit of your whole body. Your whole community of cells works together for the benefit of your whole community of cells called your body. Trillions of cells all come out of one first primordial cell. They're not fighting each other. They're not competing with each other for the control of your body, because the moment they start doing it, what happens? You die. You've got conflict within your body. It's the same thing that happens in society, in community, in our countries. The moment the cells start to fight, we get conflict and these communities begin to die. Even when our cells, these trillions of cells, gang up into gangs of cells like the heart cells or the liver cells or the spleen cell or the brain cell or the skin cell and all the different of groups of cells in our body, they still don't fight each other. They actually work together as specialized groups of cells, supporting all the other specialized groups of cells for the benefit of the whole community. It is such a simple example of what we should be doing to become an extension of the laws of nature. Just look inside, look at ourselves, look at our body's function, and we know what the answers are. There can be no simpler and more elegant solution. So treat your community and your world as your family and start extending that and start sharing that kind of resonance wherever you go. The moment you get rid of money, the most amazing things happen. Almost virtually within the blink of an eye. No crime, no envy, no gluttony, no greed, no hoarding, no hierarchy, and especially no hunger, which is a crime against all of us, especially people that go to bed, and millions of children that go to bed at night without food. I face this reality on a daily basis because in South Africa we have more poverty now than ever before. 21 years of rule of the ANC has turned out into the most brutal fascist regime you can imagine. It is not a movement of liberation. It may have been so before. It has become the most oppressive fascist regime you can imagine. And every day I face hundreds and hundreds of starving little children in my little town that go to bed hungry. And if you could see what's happening now, just before the elections, how once again the manipulators come and try and buy votes from the people, come and do things just so they can get the votes and enslave the people for longer, you'll get so angry, it literally makes your blood curdle when you realize how they manipulate people every single time that the elections come around. And this brings us to the plan of action. But before we start this, I think let's take a little break again, and we'll come back for the real good news. See this little section we've gone through as the platform of revision, creating a powerful foundation for us to springboard ourselves into the plan of action and into the future.